Să renunțăm sau să nu renunțăm la importurile de gaz și petrol din Rusia? Aceasta este întrebarea pe care și-o pun țările Uniunii Europene. Dacă s-ar continua achiziția de resurse din Rusia, banii vor fi folosiți pentru finanțarea războiului din Ucraina. Dacă s-ar tăia brusc alimentarea cu gaz, economii puternice din Europa ar avea probleme mari și asta ar afecta și alte state. Roth este șeful Comisiei pentru Afaceri Externe din Bundestag. Discutăm împreună despre perspectiva Germaniei asupra chestiunii gazului, dar și despre complicata relație dintre UE și China. Sunt Cristina Cileacu. Începe Pașaport diplomatic. Roth, head of Foreign Affairs Committee in the Bundestag, welcome to Diplomatic Passport.
Thank you for inviting me.
Since the Russians started the war in Ukraine, the talk about the new world order started again. This is a famous theory that the elite will conquer the world and will manipulate everyone and will make us live under a dictatorship. As we see it in the real world, not in the conspiracy world, it's rather a fight between democracies and autocracies. On a long term, what do you think? Are autocracies strong enough in order to win this war?
War's back in Europe, and this is a tragic situation, not just for the people in Ukraine, but also for us, because I can't agree more. Putin attacks a country. He neglects the sovereignty of Ukraine and many other Eastern European countries, but he also attacks our values: democracy, rule of law, human rights, freedoms. And this is the €1 billion question. Are democracies, open societies, strong and vivid enough to convince the people that it's much better to live in liberal societies, in strong democracies, than in authoritarian regimes? But now we are very much focused on supporting and assisting Ukraine to defend the country, to protect the people, and to liberate the regions which are invaded by Russian troops.
So do you think it is going to be a new world order, or not really? Is this continuous fight and that's it?
Putin is obsessed by rebuilding the former Soviet Union, because the fall of the former Soviet Union was, from his point of view, the biggest tragedy in the 20th century. And now he wants to neglect the sovereignty of Ukraine. He wants to build up a new order in Europe, led by Russia in Eastern Europe, but we cannot accept this. This is not the Cold War, because in times of Cold War the Soviet leaders were interested to defend the political status quo. But he wants to draw the maps of Europe in a completely new way. And that is the big difference to previous times. And there is another challenge. We spoke about a bipolar world, but now we have three global actors. The West, led by the United States; Europe, which is going to play a more and more important role; Russia; and China. And China's role is not really clear. On one hand, China supports Russia. On the other hand, China is extremely interested to continue and strengthening its economic ties, for instance, to the European Union. But we would like to establish a more value-based relationship, and that will be not so easy for China. So we don't have just two players. We have the United States, we have the European Union, we have Russia, which is extremely weak. It's a weak country, but we have to take into account that Russia remains a nuclear power. with more than 6,000 atomic weapons, and there is China.
China that also invests a lot in nuclear power, especially now.
Yeah, for sure, and there are similar developments. The strategy of Russia, the strategy of China was similar. They are not really interested in the EU as a whole, not at all. They always try to divide us. And China divided us with strong bilateral relations and with the format of 17+1. So they want to invest in the Western Balkans, in Eastern Europe, in other European countries, but they are not really interested in establishing close and reliable ties to the European Union.
But then again, China is looking towards the German companies that invested already in China to help them make a better image when it comes to relationship with the economical side of European Union. Is this thing happening, or the German companies prefer to withdraw from China?
The economic dependency with China is extremely high. That's why we are talking about European sovereignty, not just with respect to security and defense, but also to economy. We have to take into account three dimensions of German-Chinese relations. On one hand, China is a competitor with respect to trade and economy. Secondly, we don't share the same values, and China became a more aggressive player in the region and on the global stage. And thirdly, China is a partner with respect to climate. I don't see any chance to achieve the very ambitious climate goals without China, without India, without Latin America, and that's why the European Union always has to play an encouraging role to convince others that climate is not an instrument to weaken social justice, to weaken prosperity. It's a chance for us to, the green transition is a chance for us to strengthen economy, to strengthen our welfare states, to create more sustainable jobs in our societies. That's why we have to cooperate, but we need a very clear stance on human rights, on our common values, and this is extremely, extremely concerning that China supports Russia in this war, and that we really, really miss a clear, a critical statement from Beijing with respect to this war.
What's your take on the recent summit between European Union and China? Because from China's perspective, it was rather cold, the reaction. Is it going to be a good cooperation when it comes to European Union economic, or not really?
We are very much interested on a good cooperation, but based on our values. And again, our clear expectation is that China is willing and able to be extremely clear on this war, and just Russia takes the responsibility for this war, for the war crimes and for crimes against humanity.
The effects of the Ukrainian war are also affecting our countries, and Germany is right now being pushed quite a lot from all the sides to give up the contracts, imports for gas and oil. In the same time, in your country, the businesses are not so happy about this perspective, so everyone is expecting a lot of problems when it comes to chain supplies and so on. Are the German politics and German business on the same page?
Ukraine deserves our solidarity, unlimited solidarity. It's extremely key. That's why we deliver weapons, that's why we deliver military equipment, that's why we deliver financial support. We provide financial support and humanitarian aid. That's extremely key. And we already implemented far-reaching packages of sanctions in the European Union. That was a big success for the capability of the European Union. And within a short term, we already implemented these sanctions. But the sanctions are not enough. That's why we have to discuss every day how can we increase our pressure on Putin's regime. It's a bitter reality that the dependency on energy supplies from Russia in many European countries, including Germany, is much too high. That's a bitter reality, and that brings us in a very disappointing moral dilemma. On one hand, we have to cut our energy relations. On the other hand, we have to take into consideration the economic and the social consequences. I'm very much in favor of the ban of coal, also an oil embargo as soon as possible. We have to send a clear message to the Kremlin that this energy dependency will end as soon as possible. There's one problem, and that's why we have a very controversial discussion on that. This is the gas, the natural gas supplies from Russia. Our government in Europe, also our German government, takes responsibility for social stability and for economic stability, not just for our own countries, but for Europe. And the economic consequences and the social consequences for countries like Romania and others who have extremely strong economic ties would be disastrous. It's not about the situation of private households, because I'm sure that many of my fellow citizens, many Germans, will accept a tremendously increase of energy prices. But it's a challenge for families with an average income. The problem is that with an immediate natural gas embargo, we would destroy the industrial basis in Germany. And that is a problem. And that is a problem not just for my country, but again, it should be our main goal to end this dependency as soon as possible. That's why we should start with coal and oil. I very much hope that the Council of Ministers will agree on an oil embargo within the next couple of weeks, and maybe with a phasing out period, like our solution for coal. But gas will be extremely difficult. We don't have the infrastructure, but I'm extremely grateful to countries like Italy or others who would like to support us in this very challenging situation. LNG, for instance, is an alternative, but we don't have LNG onshore terminals in Germany. We just have to build up offshore terminals in the North Sea, for instance, by the end of the year. So a lot remains to be done. I see the moral dilemma for all of us, and that's why my message to my Ukrainian friends and to all our allies in the European Union and in NATO is: we have to do our utmost best to support and assist the Ukraine in all dimensions, with humanitarian aid, with money, with weapons. With weapons, Ukraine needs to defend the country and also to liberate regions which are occupied by the Russian army.
If Germany will cut the gas imports from Russia tomorrow, what will happen for the rest of Europe?
We already established a strategy by the end of the year, but after 2022 it will become extremely difficult because again, this is not just the problem for our private households. The problem is that 37% of our gas supplies goes to the industry in Germany, and that is the biggest problem, and that makes a difference to other countries. I think an immediate gas embargo would affect other European countries next year with extremely negative economic and social consequences. And I think we really need in these challenging times economic stability. That is also in our Ukrainian friends' interest, because we are ready to reconstruct Ukraine after war. And I'm sure that my country is ready to invest a lot of money, because a stable, sovereign and free and prosper Ukraine is in our national but also in our European interest.
100 billion euros is the amount of money that Germany is willing to use for defense. That was 2% for NATO defense. That was the announcement by Chancellor Olaf Scholz. If the German economy will be weakened, is this amount of money still being able to be kept at the same level?
That's an obligation. And this is a promise not just to our citizens we have to protect. This is also a promise to our allies in NATO and the European Union. And I very much hope that there is a chance to strengthen the military and defense cooperation within the European Union and within NATO. That is also, there's also a huge potential in our relations between Romania and Germany. And the Chancellor made it very clear, if we invest 100 billion euros into defense capacities, that doesn't mean that we save the money with respect to climate, social inclusion, education. The people can count on us, but this is mandatory. We have to do much more for our national and for our European security.
Another effect of the war in Ukraine, it's another topic that the world leaders are mentioning, the food crisis. Europe is used to feed the entire world. Europe also has a common agricultural politics. Is Ukraine so important for Europe that the food crisis will start?
Yes, I didn't know that. It was a big surprise for myself when I took notice that Ukraine plays such a crucial role, in particular for the countries in Africa, or also in Asia, also Russia. Both countries play a very important role, and that's why we have to discuss in the European Union how can we compensate it, not just with money but also with food, with and others, with agriculture products.
So is there any plan so far at the level of Europe?
Our development ministry is extremely aware, and there are many discussions within the EU to take more responsibility. But honestly, it will be extremely challenging because Ukraine and also Russia played a very important role. And I'm not quite sure if just the European Union alone can compensate it.
What the world needs to learn from Ukraine when it comes to leadership? Because comparing with the European Union only, our leader seems weak.
I'm not quite sure if our leaders are weak, but thanks God,
Seems. I said seems.
Yeah, we didn't make experience with the war.
True.
And yeah, I'm so impressed and so moved by brave leaders like President Zelensky and also the people in Ukraine who fight it not just for themselves, for their families, but also for the territorial integrity of the country, but also for our common values. And that is extremely moving for all of us. And that bears a special responsibility for us to support and assist the Ukrainian people in the best way. And maybe there's one message or there's one lesson we have to learn. Don't give up. Don't give up. When the war began, I had the privilege to talk to many generals and defense and security experts. There was one consensus, a clear assessment. The Russian troops are too strong, too aggressive, too professional. It's maybe within 1 or 2 weeks, the Russian troops will defeat the Ukrainian. It's a completely different situation. And that's why the only chance for Ukraine to survive as a free and sovereign state is that we support them and assist them. That is the only chance to bring Putin back on the negotiation table. That is the only chance to stop the war.
Thank you so much for this interview.
Thank you.
Atât pentru astăzi, dar rămânem în continuare online pe pagina de Facebook a emisiunii și pe contul nostru de Twitter. Revenim cu subiecte noi din lumea diplomației și a politicii externe, vinerea viitoare de la 11:30 și reluare sâmbătă după miezul nopții. La revedere!